In this video, we're going to talk about 2D drawing and creating 2D shapes and lines inside Cinema 4D. So in the previous video, we finished the part concerning the interface and the customization of the panels, the toolbars, and the software settings in the project and so on. Now we're gonna start to create. So we saw the first menu here where we find the standard and basic commands. Then in the edit, we also check the project settings and preferences and so on. And now we are here in the create panel. Now the first command that we see here is the null object. Now the null object is not a 2D object, it's not a 3D object, but it's nothing. So why it's this useful? Let's create one. So you can see here that it's going to be placed in the origin of the 3D world. So I can select the move tool and start to move it around. And you will notice that there is nothing inside here. This is just an empty container. Now the word containers is really important because the null object is basically an empty container and can become a group. So we can call this group object if we want. Now inside the null object we can place everything. We can place 2D shapes, we can place 3D solids and so on. So it's just an empty space where we can place some stuff. Now to place something inside the group or to create hierarchies here from the objects panel, we can select a bunch of objects in the scene and then just drag it and drop it inside the null object. And this is going to create a group. Now we're going to make more examples later. Now I'm just going to go back with Ctrl Z. I just wanted to explain to you what the null object is, just to understand how you can use it also later on. Now if we go again in the create panel, then we have this next part and we can see here we have 2D objects or spline primitives and then 3D objects or mesh primitives. For example, in another video we saw how to create the 3D text. Now in the same way we can create a 2D text using the text spline. Now spline, it's in Cinema 4D everything that is 2D. So curves are splines, closed shapes are splines, and later we will also see how we can create customized 2D drawings which will be splines. So splines, it's actually vector graphics. So when we talk about 2D drawing, spline drawing, we are actually talking about vector graphics. Just like in Illustrator, for example, or in AutoCAD, we create vectors and create vertices. And this is the base of the vector graphics. Now you saw here that I just undocked this menu. So you can create more toolbars by clicking on these stripes here on the top. You will have this floating toolbar that you can then dock anywhere. So if I click here and drag it here, I just want to dock this because I find it handy to use it for this video, for example. So just as we saw in previous videos, you can customize the interface and make it your own, make it yours in order to work more comfortably. So right now I want to right click and access to this toolbar and I want to change how I'm gonna show here. So you can see the icons, the text, but also only the icons like that. And these are too small, so I will right click again and go to the icon size and make large icons. Okay, now we can work more comfortably with these 2D shapes. Now first one is gonna be the text. So let's create a text and it will always be placed on the origin of the world. So I'm gonna move it a little bit up and maybe I can change this. So I will go here in the object panel. This is a text spline. So I can give this a name. So let's call this, for example, Videocourse. Okay. And also I can copy this and paste it directly into the object tab here. And there you go. So I have created a text, a customized text, and then I can modify it with the parameters. So I can make it smaller with the changing the height. I can change the horizontal spacing. I can change the vertical spacing if I have more lines. In this case, I just have one. So I can insert another line here and move this a little bit up. Okay. And now I can change the vertical spacing. So I can use this just like any other Word editor, like Microsoft Word, for example. I can change the alignments of these words. And I can also change the plane. Now, the plane means the construction plane. Now, each time you're gonna place something in Cinema 4D, you are going to assign it to a particular construction plane. And we're also going to talk later about this. But let's now go forward here and let's create an arc. Now, if I create the arc here in the top view, this will be placed in this construction plane, which will be right here. So it's the X and Z construction plane. Now let me delete it with the delete key and recreate it, but this time I want to use, for example, the right view. So I'm gonna click on the right view and again create the same object, but now you can see that it's not placed there on the floor, so X and Z, but it's placed on these other axes. It's placed on Z and epsilon. So it depends which view you use, you're gonna place the object in a different construction plane. Now again, you can manage construction planes and change them, but these are the default construction planes right here, and this is how they behave. Okay, now let's go back to the arc, the one that I created here. So I'm gonna go to the top view again, create the arc, and there you go. Now this is an open curve or an open 2D shape. It's not closed. So what's the difference between this one and this one? Well, if you think about 3D modeling, when you're gonna extrude this, you're gonna create a surface. Instead, if you're extruding this, you will be able to create surfaces, but also a solid. So when you create shapes, probably it's always better to close them if you need to create 3D models from them, 3D objects. Otherwise, you can keep them open as you wish. Now you can see here when we select a shape, usually we have a lot of parameters that we can test, and in this case I can use a sector, which is gonna close the shape, but also segment here is gonna close it, and also ring, which is this one here, is gonna create a closed shape. And then I can edit this with the parameters as well. So these are called parametric shapes because I can, or parametric objects because I can change them using the parameters. And these are really handy because I don't have to draw everything myself. I just can select the correct parameter and the software is going to do everything for me. Now, I also want to point out a really important fact about Cinema 4D. So when you go here, you can see you have spline and mesh. And these are basically the two different ways that you can create models or you can do 3D modeling in Cinema 4D. One is by going through the curves, and then from the curve, you're going to extrude or you're going to create a 3D model. And this is similar to NURBS modeling in Rhino. And if you want, you can see a video course in Rhino in our channel. And the other way here, the option 2 is to do the polygonal modeling. So in this case, we use mesh primitives. So we start by creating a really simple object, like a cube, for example, and then we start to model it like clay. So it's kind of sculpting, or it's kind of changing the shape from a primitive object. So these are two different ways to approach 3D modeling. Using 2D and then going to 3D, or by just going directly to the 3D. And we're gonna see both in this video course. But if you're interested in polygonal modeling, you should check software like 3ds Max or Maya or Blender. If you are more interested in spline modeling or curves modeling or curvy surfaces and objects, you should check Rhino because it has a lot more tools about curve editing and so on. So let's proceed here. I'm not going to show you all the different shapes, but just to get you an idea, I will show you the most important or the most different. So the next one I want to show you is the helix, which is this one here. Now, when you create an helix, again, make sure that you are in the correct workspace or in the correct viewport or work plane. So in this time, you can see here is different from this, and you can see it has a lot of parameters. And one interesting fact about the helix here, you can create also a spiral, is that it's not in 2D, but it's in 3D. So it's a 2D object, but it develops in 3D space. So it's not just on one single plane like the others, you can see here, but it's developing in 3D. And remember that you can create 3D stuff with any of these tool here, 2D shapes. And this is also an open curve. Okay, let me delete that and let's proceed to the next one, which will be the end side. Now, end side also, it's interesting because it's it lets you create a lot of different shapes. For example, here you can increase the number of sides. You can create like a circle, but if you decrease them, you can create a line. Or if you have at least 3 sides, you can create a triangle. And this is the one that I use right here to make this like place, pause, and stop buttons set. So you have the rounding. Rounding, I think it's one of the most beautiful settings because it will let you create this nice refinement on any shape. And for example, you can round the corners also in other shapes or in 3D objects with additional editing tools, but here you have it right here directly into the object tab inside the object parameters. Okay, now let's go to the next one. And this one here are all rectangles. So also using the rectangle, you can have the rounding and you can increase it a lot. And you can create these nice curvy corners. Now, the radius cannot be more than the half of the side of your object because it needs some space to round. So if it's bigger than the half of one side, it's not going to be able to round more than that. It's going to become a circle basically, and it's going to stop there. You can see here, but now I can increase the width so I have more space to round. But again, it's going to stop there. It will not round this part because it's already arrived here to the limit. So how we can manage all the round corners separately, we're going to see that later, but this is only a parameter that we can apply or not. And you can create like a smartphone shape with this and then extrude it. So can be useful later. I'm gonna place it here. And also you have these many different types of shape which are more advanced, like the Cog Wheel and you can see here the flower and the star. Now these are all pretty similar and usually they have a lot of parameters. So you can change the inner radius, the outer radius, make spikes or make something more like something like that. You can twist, you can make like a circular saw, and you can increase the points. So you really have a lot of options with this. Again, the flower as well. Now be careful not to overlap lines like this. Well, this is beautiful in 2D, but it will be a nightmare in 3D. So be careful. If you want to create shapes for 3D, you better don't overlap. And this is the Cog Wheel. And also here you have many options. You have legacy mode, which is gonna show you like some options. And if you uncheck the legacy mode, you can work then in the single elements like the teeth, change it, make it really different solutions here. So there's really a lot to experiment with. So take your time, make sure that you check everything because you will have a lot of options. Now, I believe that these are all good shapes to use for graphic design or vector graphics, like for example, creating a logo or infographic, something that you can do, for example, also in Illustrator or After Effects. But you can also use Cinema 4D not only for graphic design, of course, but with architecture. So this one here, it's, I think, the perfect tool if you do structures, architectural structure, because you can see we can create all these shapes that are usually used in architecture. Well, these are used to create, for example, beams and pillars and columns. Well, these are actually in steel, so you can create steel columns, steel beams. So for example, let me just show you one. So this is kind of the standard, and then you can manipulate this, you can modify this again using its parameters. And these are actually values that you will find in reality. And here you can change the shape, customize it a little bit, and then you can extrude them with the extrude tool and create 3D models perfect for architecture. Now, probably I would appreciate here a little bit of rounding again, because these parts are usually a little bit rounded in reality. Well, anything in reality, it's a little bit rounded. So unfortunately, we don't have it here, but we can add it later on with the editing tools. Now, I want to show you the last two, which is the formula and the empty spline. Now, the formula, I think it's a pretty tricky one. It lets you create some curve, but based on a mathematic formula here. So you need to understand mathematics, I guess. So I can just play around here with this T min and T max. And also you can see here is becoming a little bit too edgy. So I'm going to increase the samples. So every time you increase samples in any software, it's improving the quality. So in this case, I'm increasing the segments of that curve. Otherwise, it's gonna look like that, and it's not really what I intended to. I want to do a nice curve, so I'm gonna increase this. And well, you can experiment with this and see what you can do. And finally, we have the empty spline. Now, empty spline, it's kind of a null object. So it's gonna be empty until I will insert something inside there. And usually you can use this command right here, which is the Spline Pen. Now, if you hold with the left mouse, you can see that you have also other options, but let's start with the Spline Pen. So I am inside the spline. I will select this Spline Pen and start to click with the left mouse. And right now you can see I am creating some points. Now those points are actually vertices. What's inside between one point and the other, that's the vector. And this is the base of vector graphics. Now, if I continue to click here, I will create corners. But if I click and drag the left mouse, I'm gonna create curves. So I have these two types of creation, two creation methods. One is by clicking and dragging, the other is by clicking once, and that's it. So you have these two types of drawing. Now, when you finish, you can, well, either right click here and select another option, or you ask with the ESC key to finish the spline. Now, what we can do here is start to manipulate the spline. Also, if you roll over, you can see those parts, which are the points or vertices, and the edges or curves or vectors. So for example, I want to change this point. I can click there and move it around. Or I can change this and I want to rotate it. So you can see how you can manipulate these sub-objects. I can scale it. And if I have a curve like this, I can change the curve, but I can also work with the handles. So I can change the way the curve will behave. And also, if I hold the Shift key and click again, I'm gonna break that handle so that I can create more interesting effects. Again, just like Illustrator, I'm working with vector graphics here. Okay, now you can also go here in the spline. And by the way, it's always useful to give names here in the objects panel. So I can call this my curve, because when your scene is going to be really complex and full of objects, you can find something just by searching here using the search bar. You can search for example, my, and it's going to find everything with that letters inside or word. So it's pretty helpful when you create complex scenes to name everything so you can find it right away using the objects panel. And this is another really important feature of the objects panel. Okay, so if I select my spline, I can then go here and close it, but this is gonna close taking the first point that you've placed and the last, and it's gonna close it just like that. It's gonna create a closed shape. So also understand that you always have a starting point here and a path and then an ending point for that path. And this is going to be useful later on. So just remember this. Now, I want to leave this curve open. So I'm going to uncheck the close spline. And I want to use other types of line type. So if I click, this is linear. So I don't have curves anymore. Cubic, now I only have curves. Akima, just another type of curve. B-spline, which is something that in other software is called control vertices line. And Bezier, which is the more complex. Now let's go through everything. Now, linear is pretty simple to understand. You have those points, you don't have curves anymore. Cubic, this time you can see you have curves and the control points, the control vertices are inside the curve, and these are usually called interpolation points. And then you have Akima, again, the points are inside. And then you have B-spline. Now this time the points are outside. And this is why this is called control vertices, because you can control the curve from outside. And finally you have Bezier. Now in this type of curve, you don't have only the single pointer, but you also have the handles that you can manage, just as we saw previously. And that's it. These are the different types that you can use. Now we're gonna stop here in this video, but we will continue to talk about drawing and 2D drawing and 2D editing later on. But what I want to show you here is that we are working now in this mode, which is the points mode. Now, when you want to get back to the standard mode, just click here in the model, and then you can select and manipulate the models and not the single points. But you can always go back to points, to edges, to polygons when you do 3D modeling, and to model when you want to work with the whole object and not with the sub-object. So this will be all for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did it, please subscribe to the channel and also join if you want to support our channel a little bit more. and you can write your comments, you can ask questions, you can also give suggestions to other users. Please also check our other video courses in 3D modeling and Rhino, for example, or SketchUp if you want to do polygonal modeling, but we also have more video guides and more video courses already in the channel and also to coming soon. So stay tuned. Again, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.